Well, welcome everybody to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch an episode and commentate along whilst trying to guess my special guest's favourite things about the instalment in question.
Hello, Toby. You join me in the fertile, featureless fenland of Cambridge. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this excellent series. I'm a massive Doctor Who fan, and I could wax lyrical about the virtues of Tom Baker and Matt Smith. But today I'm choosing a slightly more complex topic, shall we say, something which is an episode, a story which is not always regarded as highly as I think it should be. I want to talk about Attack of the Cybermen. This is the story that rekindled my love of Doctor Who. I was a massive fan of Tom Baker. I wept like a bereaved child when he regenerated at the end of Logopolis. And then I kind of dipped in and out of the Peter Davison era. I didn't watch the Peter Davison, Colin Baker regeneration. I didn't watch Twin Dilemma, but I turned on in, I think it was the January of 1985, and I watched Attack of the Cybermen, and I was hooked, and then I loved the whole of Colin Baker's first full season. One of the reasons that I tuned in and decided to pay full attention to this new Doctor was my father, Roger Bunce, sometimes a special feature on Doctor Who DVDs. My dad was working on Time Lash. He was also working on Revelation of the Daleks, and he told me that he was really enjoying them and he was really enjoying Colin Baker as the new Doctor, and he got me Colin Baker's autograph. I've got it up in my loft, I think. I would have pulled it down, but you know, life is short and loft ladders are long. So there it is. My reasons are very personal. I hope you will enjoy watching Attack of the Cybermen, and I'll see you after episode 1, where I will be selecting 2 of my favourite aspects of the show to talk about, hopefully in not too much length. Enjoy the show.
Well, welcome everybody. The voice you just heard there introducing Attack of the Cybermen was Robin Bunce, who is, among many things, a very smart and gifted academic, resident in Cambridge, doing all sorts of, invoking all sorts of popular culture of the kind we love in his academic studies. And in fact, his father, Roger Bunce, sent me a treatise Robin had written about, or mentioned to me about Evil of the Daleks back in the day. Roger was very proud of Robin tying in Roger's academia with his love for a programme that Roger himself worked on. Roger was a BBC cameraman who worked on stories right back in the day and was an enthusiast. He did indeed appear on DVD extras, including on the commentary for The Web of Fear, a story which, when it was returned and was showed at a London cinema, there were invited guests: Deborah Watling, Ralph Watson, Fraser Hines. I was delighted as I went. I was chairing the Q&A and saw Roger queuing up like a customer, which he was. So I was delighted to be able to go, we're going to throw some questions out now to somebody in the audience, because Roger Bunce was the cameraman, and he worked with most of the classic Doctors. He did a Who's Round for Me, which was a 2-parter. Lovely man, Roger, who died relatively recently, and is one of those people, people will die, and people who are older than you will die. But Roger was such a sort of cheerful, ebullient sort of character, and always answered an email, always signed off, cheers, love Rog, love LUV, and was so sort of keen about preserving the legacy of the BBC, furious about the sale of TV Centre, but also I imagined him drinking real ale and being outside with a sort of short-sleeved body warmer and having a penknife in his pocket. I don't know if he had any of those things, but that's how I imagine him. A real enthusiast, a lovely chap, always very helpful, and just always there. So and we knew he was ill when we did the Web of Fear commentary. But he seemed to be... anyway, look, it doesn't matter. But I do miss Roger, so I can imagine how bereft the Bunce family have been feeling these past 18 months or so. So very kind of Robin, who I've actually, I don't really know. I've had more of a relationship, via emails than anything else. But that is the way of things these days. But I know that he will bring an intellect and an intelligence to his appreciation of Attack of the Cybermen. A fantastic perspective from somebody that, as he said, interestingly, he loves Matt Smith and Tom Baker, but he wants to fly the flag for Attack of the Cybermen. So let's go back. Doctor Who is riding high. We've just had the 20th anniversary season hot on the heels. The 21st season hot on the heels of the 20th anniversary special, when Longleat House had queues and oversold, and there was a 20th anniversary special, then a follow-up season where we had what has been voted the greatest story of all time many times, The Caves of Androzani. Peter Davison going out on a high, handing over the reins to an exciting new Doctor, and they'd had the experiment with the Resurrection of the Daleks, which was edited together into 2 longer episodes, and that made it have a sort of epic kind of feel. I remember when that was on. So that's what they decided to do with this season. Oh, amazing. So, I mean, Doctor Who was riding high at this point, and by the end of the year, it was a very different story. What an interesting time to be alive. And this is very much in my memories and experiences of being a young Doctor Who fan. So let us see what is in store for us as we... Tomb of the Cybermen didn't exist at this point. So a very exciting return to the planet Telos with the Cybermen who've made such an impact when they returned with Earthshock. So let's see as we go to press play on Attack of the Cybermen in 3, 2, 1. And I've pressed play. There we go. What's going to happen now? Doctor Who's going to start after a hiatus. And it's starting very... I might keep this in. No, I can't. And I am going to start in 3, 2, 1. So, how exciting is this? So full disclosure, I was, as a kid, I was not a massive fan of Peter Davison, largely because he was not Tom Baker. I adore Peter Davison now. He's probably in my top 3 Doctors. But I was very excited and delighted by Colin Baker, whom I had enjoyed in Arc of Infinity. He'd managed to make his role in that of guard captain one of the most memorable parts. Capital letters for the opening title captions, which is very interesting. Watch when I say interesting, I'm being anything but. So, what I love about Doctor Who is even in the 2 obvious cannon fodder characters, we've got some very Eric Saywood dialogue. More bulges than an antenatal clinic. It's him trying to add a bit of adultness to Doctor Who. But here is Stephen Churchett, who died very recently. I was furious I was unable to get him an obituary in The Guardian. He was not only a character actor well known to modern viewers because he is Marcus Christie, the in and out solicitor of Dirty Den Watts, who had a long in and out history with EastEnders and a memorable character who'd generated some column inches when he returned relatively recently. But also as a writer, had a play at the West End, Tom and Viv, and also... which did really well at the West End. It had Michael Gambon in it, but also then went on to write numerous episodes of the likes of Inspector Morse, including The Remorseful Day, the last one. So you would think he had done enough to earn his place to be given 700 words by me, but sadly did not. I believe Anthony Hayward did one for the Telegraph, so at least he got somebody competent giving him his dues. Anthony is a fine obituarist. Stephen was very high on my list of people to do from Who's Round, even though that's the end of him, although we do see him actually being cybernized a bit later. But that's pretty much his contribution to Doctor Who. But I love the fact that people like that, even, as I say, the cannon fodder, the people that are there, if you're a seasoned Doctor Who fan, you know, are going to find something suspicious and die horribly. And you need actors to play those roles, and hopefully it's good ones. And I love it when it's ones with a story to tell. And I was always delighted to see, oh, that guy who gets killed at the beginning of Attack of the Cybermen has, you know, become an acclaimed and esteemed writer of high-end stuff that, you know, has been seen and consumed by everybody. And so sad, and I think slightly cruel, that, although of course it makes no difference once you're dead whether you get an obituary in the newspapers or not, but it's the sort of thing that I think is important. I like people to be given their due, which is why my life's work seems to have been to be pointing out what you might have seen somebody in elsewhere, so that you can at least acknowledge their life outside of their brief sabbatical in Doctor Who's bill. It's an odd peccadillo, but one that but one that I, for some reason, it's my kink, baby. Don't kink shame me. So here we have Colin Baker, who is the first Doctor I ever met, and he does all. He's a very theatrical Doctor, but actually this sort of television is slightly theatrical in style. You know, the performances that you give with this sort of way of making television are very different to what you give now. And I actually did a short film recently where I was playing an 80s TV hero called Inspector Wen. So my casting was, you know, a bit of a joke. And I actually did the little touch on the nose thing that he does with that he does with Perry. His Doctor is certainly. I mean, the costume. I never minded the costume. You know, I do look at it now and go, I can see why it's one of those choices that does. That when somebody is dressed like that in front of, you know, 1980s scenery, it does look slightly sort of artificial and draws attention to itself as a piece of artifice and try-hard fantasy. But I actually never minded it that much as a kid, and I like the idea of the sort of Doctor being tasteless. But what I do like about this adventure, and I certainly think the bits that hit me as a kid, I was desperate for Doctor Who to be grown up. That's the thing about, you know, a program that is associated with children, is that, you know, as a you know, you never wanted to be Luke Skywalker, you wanted to be Han Solo because he was the older, cooler one. And I like this. I loved Terry Malloy's putting his finger in his ear acting there, because that's the sort of thing people do in things like the Sweeney and not in Doctor Who. So seeing it in Doctor Who, everything is tonally here rather reminiscent of the programs that grown-ups watch. I was allowed to watch grown-up programs. My mother and I have always had something of a tricky relationship, but I have to say she was always very open to us being capable of digesting forms of entertainment meant for older people. She trusted our intelligence and never hid anything from us. I remember a friend of ours being shocked to come round when The Young Ones was on and I was watching it. So I always felt that if something reminded me of the grown-up programs, and this does, the film stock, lest we forget, it's not long after this that Doctor Who goes on to being shot on videotape outside. I really like film. This, you know, if you took this scene now with Terry Malloy being sort of furtive and undercover on the phone and talking about kilos of plastic, that all feels like it's from a grown-up show about organised crime and terrorism, and, you know, and because it's reminiscent of Matthew Robinson's last production, Matthew Robinson, the director of this, where, you know, you have policemen with the guns with silencers on mowing people down in the street. That all felt like the sort of stuff I wanted from my Doctor Who. I wanted it to be more real and less fantastical. Now, as I'm a little bit older, and you know, you can see this series in context of where, you know, what they did with Earthshock, which was the most amazing thing to behold as a kid. The Cybermen as a surprise, the death of Adric, and then Eric Saywood realised, oh, okay, this people like this stuff, and then you have a similar thing with Resurrection of the Daleks, where again you got a director who was really sympathetic to it and did the grittier elements of it very very well. You can see why in Eric Saywood's mind, well, why don't that's the tone we should have? But of course, the reason Earthshock works really well is because it's a bit of a shock, and it stands out. Whereas this season, tonally, it does really enjoy its grimness and its violence, and misses the fantastical. And where the fantastical is, of course, is it's Colin Baker's costume, which is a slightly uneasy fit, and it's not a dissonance that is necessarily helpful. But I'm intellectualizing. I have to say, I love all of this. It's a very 80s suit that Maurice Colborne's got on, isn't it? But I love these actors. James Beckett, who plays Payne, is one of those actors that you go, oh, I've seen him in everything. And then you look him up and go, oh, I've never seen any of those things. And he's got one of those faces that makes you think you know him, when actually he wasn't in an awful lot. And he was also one of those actors that we could never find. But some friends of mine recently had cause to chat to Matthew Robinson, who I've never met, and they said, do you know whatever became of James Beckett? He said, oh yeah, I'm still in touch with him, I talk to him all the time. He actually mentioned he might quite like doing a Doctor Who event, and so he's been sort of hiding in plain sight, totally unaware that because there are a few of us who I've mentioned, myself, Ben Jolly, Stephen Griffiths, the Phantom Films lads, Paul and Dexter, who are very keen on tracking down and talking to, and Richard Bignell too, on tracking down and talking to some of those actors that we've never quite traced. And they're not all, although two of them are from the first Dalek story, they're not all from the early years. Actually, they come up to be quite recent, like the Lucosa. But James Beckett was one of those mysterious ones who we never knew. But there he was. He was hanging around all the time. As I speak, I don't think he has yet done that event, but I think moves are being made to contact him, and he's perfectly cast. And even his name, James Beckett, it's like, oh, well, that's a bit like James Beck from Dad's Army, but it's not. But they're similar sort of types as well. So it seems he's a sort of conglomeration of all sorts of things that are familiar, and yet they're all wrong. You don't actually know him, and he wasn't in that thing. Lose the Motor. I love all that. I love the way that this is shot. This is shot very authentically on film, with the way that these guys are costumed. I like Terry Malloy in this. And I do like the murderous silent policemen. I think they're glorious at the moment. We will go on to discuss them later. But they were a particularly scary thing of Resurrection of the Daleks. And I know that I always get this. I have this theory that Eric Saywood kind of deliberately pushes his luck. So, you know, he knew the history of Doctor Who. He knew that Barry Letts had got in trouble for having Auton policemen. He knew that Philip Hinchcliffe had cut out Noah begging to be killed in Ark in Space, and so in Resurrection, and then in this he has killer police people. In Revelation of the Daleks, he has a character beg his daughter to kill him. You know, it's almost like he's going, should we see if we can do the things they didn't used to be allowed to do? And I admire the pushing of the envelope, but equally, what seemed very gritty to me as how old was I? 11-year-old, and I love a submachine gun and all of that, but I also love. I love Brian Glover's. We will talk a lot about Glover. That thing, that's obscene. I love. I believe that and this kind of slightly adult, just that sort of adult window dressing. I'm with you, Mr. Litton. I love the banter between these guys. I think it works. Eric Saywood's dialogue doesn't always work, and better. People than I have sort of pointed out where his characters say things like, they must think us fools, instead of you must think I'm an idiot or whatever. But I actually think he does this sort of macho bantery stuff quite well. And I know that in and of itself is slightly awkward to watch, the sort of celebration of, especially when so much drama of these days was, middle-aged men arguing in a room. and lots of other sorts of people and characters not being represented. I understand all of that, but I like that thing about I used to use one of these when I did the council. This time it's for swinging, not for leaning on. That's a nice line. It always reminds me of my friend Alfie Joey, who is a lovely comedian, a presenter on radio on BBC Newcastle, and one of the friendliest and nicest guys that I've never seen lose his temper, except he gets infuriated with lazy council workers. I don't know what happened. Maybe he was kidnapped by some as a child. But I remember driving past some roadworks, and they were probably just discussing what they were going to do next. We couldn't believe how many of them were there, and I just remember him out the window going, "Do some work!" And he's honestly the nicest man on the planet, but that was his hill. That was his kink, was to yell at people he thought were lazing on the council buck. So that line always reminds me of Alfie. Oh yes, oh my goodness me, this is talk about Eric Saywood thinking of pushing buttons in terms of trying things that haven't been done or haven't been got away with. This tease that we're going to lose the police box. I remember being so angry with that idea, and I don't know if when your production team has an eye on courting the fans, whether having an eye on pissing them off is a wise move. But now obviously I'm in these boots don't fit me. I love Brian Glover. You court the fans and then infuriate them. Actually, fans and I probably deserve to be infuriated, resistant to change, and always looking over my shoulder for something to be cross about, which in life and in Doctor Who is a lesson I still often haven't learnt at times, and I wish I would. And when I see other people do it, I go, oh, come on, loosen up, enjoy it. And yet this physician sometimes needs to write himself a prescription of that kind. But I'd have loved that, they've mentioned Tegan and Zoe and Susan and Jamie. Oh, this is exciting. And because any connection to the past, because the past was not only another country, it was where you definitely want to spend your holidays. Whereas, of course, this is in the past now. And, we can look at it from a slightly more detached and from a distance. Where I understand, the terrible Zodin as well. I do understand the people that find Saywood's approach questionable, and yet I can still sort of see them as a kind of guilty pleasure, particularly the sort of violence and the scares. That was the sort of stuff I really wanted in Doctor Who at that time, partially because I got the sense that my school pals, certainly there was that thing of people favouring the A-Team, and the A-Team people seemed to like because it had explosions and violence. So if Doctor Who was violent, it was like a riposte to that. It was like, look, this is grown, because I equated violence with grown up. Whereas, of course, some of the most effective moments are things that are done by suggestion or things that you don't see. There is always a feeling that, or maybe it's just a feeling I'm having now, that Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant spend an awful lot of time in this season walking towards the story. So I know they're trying to trace that signal or whatever, but they're not getting an awful lot to do except to sort of bicker at each other. And then in Vengeance on Varos, they've got that stuff where they run out of fuel and sit and argue. Revelation of the Daleks takes it to a perverse extent where they don't get to the story till the end of episode 1. And it does feel like Saywood is more interested in his guest characters. But I think part of the appeal of Doctor Who is that you get to meet a whole load of new people in each new story, and you get embroiled in their fates, and part of it is a guessing game of who you're going to root for, who's going to survive, and the Doctor and the companion are often conduits to other people's stories, and I sometimes feel I'm oddly sometimes less interested in the regulars because I sort of take them for granted, and I'm not quite sure I'm not sure I've come to terms with how I feel about that. And I'm also not sure how I feel about some of the sort of slightly forced comedy. I think Colin Baker is a is a perky enough performer that some of this sort of contrived comedic stuff is not necessarily as much fun as those involved think it is. I don't know, but he's always. I think Colin Baker's great at this. Mind racing stuff going on while something's going wrong, and I think he exudes a sort of keen and rather testy intelligence, and he's got a forcefulness and a presence that sort of overcomes the costume, and he's too much of a gent. I know he's sort of said, I would quite like something more austere, but I wonder how. I think our image of his Doctor in his era would be very, very different if he wasn't in that costume, sliding doors and all of that. But and that's supposed to be the I Am Foreman scrapyard as well, isn't it? I totally overcome that. Well, at least they spelt Foreman right. But yes, it was getting to the point where there's a lot of. Yeah, let's give the fans what they want. But unless you get it absolutely bang on, those very people that you think you're serving are going to be furious. And I remember that there was a lot of that going on the time where, they were giving you something, but they weren't. Yeah, there was some sort of compromise. We've brought back the Silurians, but we don't know what their third eye does. Or whatever. We've brought the Brigadier, but we've got the dates wrong. And then you kind of go, well, what was it therefore worth doing? And as I say, I loved anything that was a reference to the past, even though I hadn't seen the past. And I think that was false nutrition. So this is a pretty grim death for poor old Payne. So he's gone, James Beckett, but hopefully appearing at an event near you soon. And I do like those. I do like those characters. Oh, and it's an organ, and they do a joke, don't they? It's quite fun, actually. The TARDIS changing shape, and I'm pretty certain Colin worked out this bit of business. I think he told me that when he was the first Doctor I met. I'm sure I've told this story, so just keep it brief. If your first Doctor you get to meet is Colin Baker, in fact, the first famous person you as an impressionable and nervous youngster get to meet is Colin Baker, then I think you're very, very lucky, because I was, and it was an experience that was better than I could have imagined, and that was down to the generosity, decency and conduct of Colin Baker, who is a wonderful ambassador to Doctor Who, then as now. And this is where we get, it's the sort of waywardness of tone, I guess, that's the interesting thing about this period in the show, because I love these silent policemen. I think they're really spooky. They're a really good presence in Resurrection. And here we've got a comedy moment where he raises his hands and lowers his hands. A comedy whacking great inverted commas moment where the Doctor puts the hat on, and as you say, the joke is that Perry could have shot him in the face. You just think, I think somebody needs another eye on this, just ironing out that sort of stuff, because it's tonally, it's a dissonance that, as I say, isn't helpful with the drama. It's slightly odd, but and I think they're slightly undermined, these two coppers of Lytton who they come back at the beginning, and you think, oh great, they're going to be like they are in Resurrection of the Daleks, where they do that horrible bit where they chase Tegan and then shoot the man with the metal detector on the edge of the River Thames, and they're grim and silent and stalky, and now that's them sort of dispensed with, and I remember feeling that was a bit of a shame. I think this stuff now is very good, but I remember being furious at the time, because I'm from a time when the Target books had on the back, the Cybermen, they have the strength of 10 men or whatever, and they are indestructible, and the idea was that Cybermen, how thick is it, less than you? he's almost like Eric Saywood has sort of tried to clone Chris Boucher, but his the photocopier he's used to photocopy Chris Boucher hasn't quite got enough toner in it. But I do like this scene, and I think the setting of the sewers is nice and atmospheric. But again, how many sort of continuity things are being piled on and piled on? And let's not even get to the mystery of who wrote it. And I did suggest looking for Paula Moore, although my belief is that the lady in question was never going to give an interview because it would have compromised the royalties that she was getting, because they actually did a very naughty thing here by ascribing it to a writer who had nothing to do with it in order that the script editor get to write the scripts. That is slightly, not done. There's a reason that there are rules with the Writers Guild in the BBC, and it's to protect the interests of its members who are freelance writers. But you don't need a lecture on that. But I do love the black camouflage Cyberman too. I think that's a terrific idea. But Paula, this hasn't been reported actually, but Paula Moore is dead. She died a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. But I only found out way too late to do any sort of piece about it or announcement or anything like that. But yes, I'm afraid Paula Moore or Paula Woolsey is no longer with us. So we will never hear from her about exactly what went on from her end. Were she ever allowed to or prepared to say so? I love this. I think it's just that simple conceit of going, well, let's have a Cyberman that's black. And I love the fact that Griffiths hasn't listened and he's sequestered a gun. I was furious with the fact that the Cyberman was damaged by bullets. Bullets can't stop Cybermen. Cybermen. That to me was as a kid who was very keen to be furious about stuff. It's what gave me an identity. You're nobody if you've got nothing to be righteously angry about. And I loved being furious about Doctor Who. I hated it, but it, as I say, it made me feel as if I had some drive, as if I was alive. There's nothing like having a resentment to be able to give voice to enunciate all those complicated feelings that are coursing through your veins as you're a youngster, and the things that I thought Doctor Who was doing wrong, much as I still tuned in every week and pored over the research and blah 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 blah. But it was an enunciation of more complicated things going on inside. I love that scene now. I think it's really nicely directed. I still think if you're going to bring back the Doctor's enemies, the ones who are famously impervious to bullets, don't have them pervious to bullets, even though a bit of spraying green goo is always fun. But I love that music. I love the throbbing, heartbeaty music that Malcolm Clarke does. Although I think elsewhere in this story, the score is very almost parodic, and again it's a sort of dissonance in tone where almost people are going, oh, because we can have a bit of fun with it, we should. But I think the different levels on this set are great. I think the Cybermen in the shadows are great. I think the Black Cyberman is a terrific idea. I'm sad to see the policemen are now being cybernized, especially as also so that we know that they're the same people. They've still got their policeman's. Has he still even got? I didn't look properly. So I think they still got his policeman's helmet on. I think when you're undergoing cyber conversion, they'll probably take your hat off. But Stephen Churchett is there as well. He said he'd got terrible spots that day, or terrible cold sore or something. So he wasn't over the moon to be doing it, because essentially it's sort of supporting artiste work, isn't it? Riften 5, I like that. But the idea that a whole planet will be inhabited by people who all have a similar characteristic is low ambition in terms of, I think, Doctor Who and world building. That the Earth is a planet, and different cultures and different people have all sorts of different characteristics. So the idea that everyone from that planet is one thing is strangely limiting, but not unique to this. David Banks, I love. I miss Mark Hardy. I find Brian Orrell's Cyber Lieutenant not quite as... Mark Hardy's got a slightly more rasping delivery, so I I prefer my Hardy Cyber Lieutenant to my Brian Orrell Cyber Lieutenant, because Orrell's diction is slightly like that. Whereas Mark Hardy is like... Anyway, I'm not going to stop doing Cyberman impressions. David Banks, I love. I think he is such a key to the success of the Cyberman. That's a beautiful shot. I remember there being a brilliant picture in Doctor Who magazine of that Cyberman's head and this sort of valley in the background, and it's absolutely glorious. I love this location stuff, all this smokiness, and I think, and it's very. I mean, I hadn't seen Tomb at the time, but those valleys are very reminiscent of Tomb, aren't they? And we come to an auspicious moment. Pat Gorman here in his last, I think, appearance in Doctor Who, one of the greatest servants to Doctor Who of all time, getting killed there in Doctor Who for the last time. Pat has been in it since his Dalek Invasion of Earth, his first one, very, very early, so recognisable in so many, Pertwee in particular, and that's the end of him. But what a great servant to Doctor Who and to British television in general. Much loved and used by directors because he was very professional. And, again, he had kind of recognisable face, but that didn't... And I love that you can sort of spot Pat Gorman in all sorts of 70s and 80s British television and 60s British television. A legend who is, I find his presence very comforting. When I was getting divorced and I moved out to live with my friend Peter, Pat Gorman lived only about 3 streets away, but I've since discovered he wasn't wild about being interviewed. So although he's happy to send back signed pictures to people and things like that, but he didn't. I never got the chance to meet him and chat to him, which is a shame. It's nice to see, isn't it, Terry Malloy in this? I think he's great in this, and I think it's a very decent thing to do, to go, you've done a good job as Davros, you're hidden behind a mask, you're a good actor, let's give you a chance to do something in Vision. And I remember really liking his character in this. I think it's because he wins me over with the way he says "you're bonkers" in this scene. And so I remember being really upset when I spent the whole of the following week after the cliffhanger hoping that he hadn't actually been killed, but also kind of hoping he had, because I knew that the Cybermen killing somebody with one blow to the back of the head was one of the things that they did in the books, and that was a show of how strong they were, even though they did it with a karate chop in the books rather than a fist as it is here. But so I was sort of torn, is that I didn't want him to be stunned because I wanted the Cybermen to be those strong, indomitable creatures, but also I really liked his character. These two are funny, aren't they? Michael Atwell is one of those really dirty actors. My friend Andy Linden, who's a Cockney character actor, quite a short, Toby Juggy sort of character actor, he likes his dirty actors, does Andy, and he likes all the sort of the L.Q. Joneses and the and the actors used by Peckinpah, the dirty cowboy actors. But there's also a certain breed of sort of Cockney character actors who are also a bit dirty, And you said you came from Fulham. I love that line. That is beautiful. I love Brian Glover. So we'll come back to Atwell and his dirty acting a bit later. I know Brian Glover initially did that as Cockney, and I've seen Glover do Cockney in other things, and it's not good. And I love Brian Glover, national treasure. I think it was right that he decided to default back to his. The reason you employ Brian Glover actually is because of that wonderful voice. So, but I know that John Nathan Turner was particularly pleased with Michael Atwell, who'd been a Bill Sykes, hadn't he, in the BBC classic Oliver Twist. He was a very well-known actor, a very well-known face. He's also a cartoonist for the News of the World. But he was, he cropped up in all sorts of things in movies and on television, playing hard men. So it seemed like he was adding a touch of the grown-up to Doctor Who. But he doesn't hold back in this. And as I say, Nathan Turner, I know, was particularly pleased with him. But I occasionally think he could quite less furious at some points. And he'd also been in the Ice Warriors Atwell as well, which had surprised me, because he's Isper in the Ice Warriors. But by this point, he was a really well-known actor, Michael Atwell. He's a funny one, this one, isn't he? John Ainley, I have found this. If I think Brian Orrell's diction is slightly odd, John Ainley's as the other Cyberman, the controller's cyber chum, and the one that walks behind them here at this point, you can quite see where he's going. It's almost like he's feeling his way through. There's some strange cyber bits if you keep an eye on what's going on here. But the delight, the thrill of seeing Michael Kilgariff's name on the credits, that's what it was like for me being a fan at that time. Anything I remember seeing that it was the same guy that had played the cyber controller, and I knew he'd been in other Doctor Who's, Frontier in Space and Robot. It's an actor from the old days of Doctor Who, is automatically classier than anything we get now, because one is so self-loathing about the present that one invokes the past, which people do in many, many other areas, and I am so guilty of it. You're bonkers. I love the way he says you're bonkers. I love the way Colin rejoinder is. That's debatable. It's a very deadpan, lovely piece of timing. I'd have liked to have seen more of Russell robbing a diamonds merchant. The sort of sardonic humour that Saywood brings is actually rather good in places, even though there is that running. There is it is possible to do a sort of jokey observation about how sometimes it's a little bit too hard nosed to the point that it's comical. But I don't mind the ambition of going, let's kind of toughen up the show. Philip Hinchcliffe's show is quite tough, and I love the Hinchcliffe Holmes era. I think Holmes perhaps balances the sardonic humour with the grittiness and the toughness slightly better. I think it's all synthesized together slightly. Tom Baker's in a long coat and colourful scarf and a hat, but it's not quite as much of it's not quite as stark a standout as Colin Baker's costume. So it all melds together slightly better. The violence in the Hinchcliffe era is violent, but it doesn't go too far in the way that this season occasionally just goes a little bit too far. I'm sure I've used the example when my English teacher said we could put swear words in our stories if we wanted to, and so the first one I wrote was full of them, and he said, look, because I've allowed you to, you've done it too much and it's lost its impact. And I think the desire to sort of toughen up Doctor Who and make it a bit more muscular as a lure away from the A-Team, and as a riposte to the idea that Doctor Who is sort of cheap and slightly tatty and slightly glitzy and light-end, to make it a bit more good. I think that's a reasonable decision to make as script editor and storyteller, especially as Earthshock and Resurrection and Caves, which are the stories that do that sort of stuff well, had been the most successful ones. So I can see why they made that decision. I think oddly, it's the character, it's the way that the Doctor is portrayed that again makes its tastelessness seems somewhat misplaced when you've got a sort of, when your lead character is dressed in that way, and sometimes when your production design looks a bit more like, the blankety blank than Blade Runner, and that's a dissonance between, the way that television is made here and what they're trying to rise up against or play against or contrast to, and the resources that they have available. So. But then you have this, as I say, you've got a sort of crew-cutted Michael Atwell here, being all furious and being, is this where he does the, like you, this planet really depresses me. And his jaw is always slightly jutting, and his mouth's just always slightly ajar and sort of, cussed and, But then you've got Jonathan David, who's one of those, another of those actors that we've never really found. He's in an episode of The Professionals that I remember quite well, called Heroes, where he's one of the bad guys in it. But I say now, obviously he's doing this slightly jokingly. It's beautifully shot, all this stuff in the quarry, the head over there. Matthew Robinson really knows how to place his cameras here in the quarry. I love all of this stuff. And I love this cyber theme. So all of this stuff is really great. It's meat and drink. And yeah, whacking a Cyberman's head off, that's really containable violence because it's easily done. It's a great. Oh, they whack his hand off here, but there's quite a few. There's a lot of Cybermen do get pummeled quite a lot, which is. I get that, and that's great. That POV of the camera charging down. Again, the fact that the Cybermen are slightly vulnerable. In a way that they didn't used to be, is a compromise. But it was sort of acceptable with the Raston robot because he's the most efficient killing machine ever, and the fact that he could be chopping heads off and smashing Cybermen to bits was one thing. And I suppose these guys are augmented, so they're slightly stronger than people would be. But I do feel the Cybermen's invincibility takes a bit of a knocking. But Jonathan Davis casting I find really odd. I know he was promoted from Cyber Lieutenant, wasn't he? Because another actor was playing this Stratton and broke his arm. But it's always said, the actor Trevor Raymond. I've tried to find an actor called Trevor Raymond and never had. So that's another area that needs a bit of looking into. I'm not putting that thing on. So you've got Michael Atwell there being, plausible West End, East End, heavy. Well, there's a Freudian slip, and I'm talking about the actor Jim Freud. It's East End, genuine East End filmic villain being I'm lending a bit of gritty credibility to Doctor Who. And then you got Jonathan David, who's a bit like a number of waiters I've worked with, going, I do not want to dress as a Cyberman. Thank you very much. And it is quite an odd contrast. And he doesn't do anything wrong, but it's a piece of casting that slightly jars for me, if I'm perfectly honest. And it's through no fault of his. That's quite a nice close-up of the other Stephen there, Stephen Whale. Because they are getting cybernized. That's very sad. I love all this dark stuff in the sewers. This is all beautifully atmospheric, and the nice echo that they've got as well going on there. Credit to Nicola Bryant as well. She does such a good job as Perry. I always feel knowing. Seeing those brilliant performances that she and Peter Davison give in Caves of Androzani, I feel a bit sad that they quite often fall into that tone of sort of bickering / moaning for Perry when she's so much more interesting than that. And I think that's where Saywood does go wrong, where he mistakes sort of tedious bickering for drama or even wit or humour. I think there's a misstep there often with the interaction between the leads, which is no fault of the actors. I remember being told when I was younger that Griffiths was supposed to die at that point. I don't know if that was somebody reading Griffiths was supposed to die a bit earlier, and a friend of mine going, it was probably then. But I love the strength of the Cybermen. I love the bit where David Banks puts his two fingers on Maurice Colburn's shoulder and he sort of winces, and then that bit there with Brian Glover, who is, I think, the best thing about this story. I will be choosing him as one of those. But one of the castings they thought of for that's a great shot. He puts his camera in some good places, Matthew Robinson. Was Donald Pleasance they sounded out to play Griffiths, who you can see he would be much more of a sort of snivelling, fussy sort of characterization. But Pleasance would have been brilliant. But I adore the fact that Brian Glover has been in Doctor Who, and I think again it grounds the fantastical and gives it a plausibility and a realism. But in contrast to what James Beckett and Michael Atwill bring, there's also something utterly charming and quirky and delightful, and it's part of it's the Yorkshire accent, and it's amazing how few northern accents there are in the whole of classic Doctor Who, because so much television at that time, everybody was, RP unless, there was a specific reason not to be, which is a, really fascinating aspect of the television landscape at that time that seems so bizarre now, and yet informs so much of what we watch. So Terry Malloy here is feeling like, a sort of third companion. He's had a bit of banter. He's been terribly brave. That's a really good stunt, actually, that exploding head. He gets the gun, and he has a sort of comedy I've shot the Doctor's spaceship thing there. So Terry Malloy feels like he's on course to be, our chummy companion, but actually is not much use to the story anymore, and they don't want to pay him for episode 2. So and then we get there was me going, oh, is he dead or not? And this is the sort of Bohemian Rhapsody. No. I'm sure somebody must have done that as a video. The no, because the amount of times that they say no. But that to me was a thrilling opening episode. I remember where I was when I watched it. We had a telly in my mum's bedroom. It was before my mum's, so I went to watch it in. There. I don't know why I watched it on that one. So would that have been? I think I would have still watched this in black and white. Do you know? I think I still would have watched this in black and white. That's how. I don't think we got a colour telly till the Two Doctors. Isn't that a thing, eh? That seems now like I'm talking about, reading it on papyrus and having all the imagery drawn from me on a quill. But yes, I must have watched this in black and white, and yet I don't think about that. I've had to remind myself of that because it's to me very much in colour. And I watched Davison's last series at somebody else's house, so I definitely, I did watch those in colour, but I don't think we got a black and white, we got a colour TV till the Two Doctors. I'm pretty certain. Which is a bit frightening. I can't remember though. But I can remember which room that I was in. And maybe we weren't watching it on the portable telly. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's only important to me. But put it like this: I watched it a very long time ago, and I'm ancient, and times have changed now, and we can do things at the touch of a button, and aren't we lucky? And in those days, it was all orange squash and analog conversation. So listen, I really enjoy that first episode. I mean, I suppose the issues I have with it is that I think Colin Baker's costume, which I think as a piece of design is good, I just think it slightly doesn't quite meld with everything else around it, and that can be helpful as the Doctor, but it's almost like it's too big for the screen in the sense that, sets in those days are rendered largely on one level with 3 flats, and it's multi-camera, and it's a little light end, isn't it? That's whilst trying to be Blade Runner / Alien / which is what Saywood wants to do with the violence and the gore. But as I say, I have to be honest. As a kid, I wanted the violence. I wanted the toughness. I wanted the grimness. That made me feel like my program that was often dismissed as kid stuff could actually compete with grown-up stuff and therefore earn its rightful place, in the nation's hearts and affections. But this is, of course, where did the viewers drop off massively between episodes 1 and 2, and I think that's there's maybe one too many invocation of past glories. And I started talking about Kilgarriff, didn't I? The idea that you chase to get the actor that had played the part 20 years ago, even though you can't see his face, even though 20 years ago or whatever it was, he didn't say the lines, and now he's got a massive tum. It seems an odd way to bend over backwards in order to cast the same person. But anyway, I'm still glad he's there because I like Michael Kilgarriff, and I like an awareness and a deference to the past. I think it behoves us to pay tribute to what has gone before and realise that we aren't where we are without the skill and hard work and creativity of other people. And I think the entertainment industry is particularly bad at remembering that, and actually can often scoff at the people that went before it. So at least for all his faults, John Nathan Turner did have a respect for what had gone before in a way that doesn't always happen in this business, a business that forgets people very quickly or dispenses with them. Sometimes it's more active than that. Anyway, listen, what are my favourite? I've got to choose two favourite things. I thought it was. Is it two? Well, it is. Well, that's what Robin said he's going to do. I can't remember my own rules. I suppose that makes sense because if it was 225s, there'd be one thing for each. So, well, my two things are. I'm going to have an argument with myself because I've got to choose Brian Glover because I think he's going to be chosen at some point, and actually he gets less to do in episode 2. You said you came from Fulham, and he's got a brilliant line next week where he says time travel in an organ. I love that. So I have to choose Glover because I think actually across the whole story he's the best thing in it. So then my second thing, do I choose the black camouflage Cyberman, which I rather like? That could be my bonus thing later because I do really think it works, and it's one of those in Doctor Who always, the simplest ideas are sometimes the best, or a slight twist on something that's just taken a little bit of thought outside the box that you go, oh, that makes perfect sense, and it's really effective. And I love all that darkness in the sewers. I was too busy moaning about the fact that the Cybermen are amicable to bullets, that actually that scene with the music and the advancing Cyberman and Griffith shooting and Lytton turning the gun on him, and then the door opening and the two Cybermen coming through and the light streaming through that. I think that's a brilliantly directed sequence and really, textbook classic, wonderful Doctor Who stuff. It's got all the ingredients you want there, apart from the fact that I was too busy being distracted by the fact that Cybermen shouldn't be damaged by bullets. That Cybermen can't be damaged by anything except gold and radiation and a weather machine, and apart from that, what else have the Cyber Romans done for us? But I think the other thing that I like is what I call that gritty Euston films stuff. The fact that all the stuff with Lytton and his mob, and everything from Terry Malloy's finger in the ear, which I just love. I think that's just a lovely little touch. And I think in the book is the telephone handle greasy as well. I don't think I've made that up. Is that he speaks to the telephone and he has to wipe it, or it's a bit manky anyway, which is a nice little realistic visceral touch that again is to Saywood's credit to balance out all of those well-rehearsed arguments we have against his take on the show that I understand, and I'm sympathetic to those criticisms. But not only that. And also, it's very interesting because Maurice Colborne at the time looked brilliant in that suit. That looked really high end, but it does look a little bit 80s now, and you can sort of feel the acrylic of the shirt and that slightly light grey. That the way that suit is cut and fits is slightly. It looked amazing at the time, and now it looks just slightly dated in its cut and its shape and its colour. But I love that mob of characters. I love the interaction that they have. And as I say, there's something about the hue and grain of the film that gives it a certain authenticity or reminiscence of, stuff like Minder and The Professionals and those things that were shot on films that grown-ups watched that seemed to have a sort of atmosphere and feel and sheen about them that was just slightly grittier, slightly more urban, slightly more eavesdropped upon almost in a way, although actually some of that filming is actually, very filmic and almost cinematic in a way, or certainly large television. But that also ties in with that filming on Telos and the way that the camera is placed and the smoke and all the stuff in that quarry pit that is made to seem like a sort of industrial, cold planet. that again feels like a sort of authentic. You can feel the coldness in the air. You can hear the metal clang, and again that's something. You can see the breath in the air, and that's something to do with again the authenticity of the filming. So it's that feel, it's that film, it's that, and Michael Atwill helps with that as an actor in those scenes as well. But and even Pat Gorman, because he's got the face that fits those sorts of things in the same way that James Beckett does. So that sort of what I call that Euston-y, gritty, grimy feel. So it's not just urban because it works in the quarry pit as well. But I think you know what I mean. That and Brian Glover, they're my two things about episode 1 of Attack of the Cybermen. However, Robin Bunce, son of Roger Bunce, a high-achieving individual in his own right and a very, very nice man, but also he has a connection because he is the son of the much-missed and utterly lovely Roger Bunce, who was a cameraman on many Doctor Who's, not including Attack of the Cybermen. But what has Robin chosen for episode 1?
Well, there's so much to like about that episode. Before I get on to my picks, just a bit of background information. This was the first Doctor Who that I ever committed to the medium of VHS. So we bought a video player, I don't know, a year or so before this to watch, to record Box of Delights. So this was the first time I committed Doctor Who to VHS, and I watched that tape over and over again. In fact, I recorded the whole of Colin Baker's first season and got to know it really, really well. As I say, even to this day, I still love that season. Anyway, turning to this episode, what are the two things that I'm going to choose of this smorgasbord of wonder that we've just experienced? Well, first of all, I'm going to say that what I love about this episode is the recreation of 1985. The BBC, the script writers have done such a good job, Paul and Moore I should say of course, has done such a good job creating a plausible 1985. I'm thinking about Lytton's suit. I'm thinking about the joke about council workers leaning on their shovels, which is kind of pitch perfect Dame Shirley Porter 1985. I love the location work. I love the way that Lytton's car pulls up outside this incredible office block in Hammersmith. It's a great example of 80s modernism. Sadly, it was pulled down a few years ago. I went and had a quick look at Hammersmith. I went and had a quick look at the area where this was shot in preparation for this video. And what I noticed is that the location scouts chose the most 80s view in that whole vicinity. There's kind of 70s brutalist office blocks in the background. There's a whole bunch of Victorian stuff just around the corner. But the location scouts obviously zeroed in on this kind of high 80s modernist incredible building. So I think what they're doing in creating this incredible feel of the 1980s, this wonderful distillation of 1985. I think what they're doing is they're doing that thing that H.G. Wells does, which H.G. Wells calls the domestication of the impossible. That is to say, they are creating a plausible right now, and then dropping something alien and something fantastic into it. And in so doing, by creating such a plausible real world, it makes the alien invasion, or it makes this science fiction element all the more plausible. So as I say, that's my first pick. I love the way they've recreated 1985. My second pick from this episode would have to be Nicola Bryant and her portrayal of Perry. Nicola Bryant, I think, is one of the real gems of this era of Doctor Who, and together with Ace, I think, these are the two companions that really stood out to me from 80s Who. What do I like about Nicola Bryant's performance in this case? Well, first of all, I love the way that she consistently laughs at the Doctor's foibles. It's often said that Peter Davison is a real human Doctor. I think Colin Baker is a really human Doctor as well, but he's human in a different way. He's human in the sense that he has these foibles, and he has a slightly overinflated sense of his own importance. And Nicola Bryant, the way she reacts off him, brings that out beautifully. I also love the way that Nicola Bryant holds a gun. Okay, so she holds a gun a couple of times in this episode, and both times you can see a kind of moral struggle in her performance. Particularly when Colin Baker is popping up out of that hole in the ground wearing the police officer's hat. you can see the kind of moral confusion, the resolution tempered with the knowledge that she's about to, use lethal force. So I think Nicola Bryant is just fantastic. She makes all of the action plausible. She makes the Doctor more plausible because of her performance. So those are my picks, 1985 and Nicola Bryant. Those are my two picks from episode 1. I'll let you enjoy episode 2 and I'll run you through my picks from episode 2 in, 45, 50 minutes, whatever, something like that. Enjoy.
Thanks, Robin. And as he alludes, when I approached everybody to do this, these were, planned as podcasts and videos. I will, I'm sure, one day put the videos together, but the podcasts will certainly be out a lot earlier than that. So with apologies to all of my guests who went to trouble to film themselves in excellent quality with fantastic backdrops and, really pay attention to that. And for most consumers, it's in podcast form. But you live and learn. I went into these podcasts utterly clueless as to what I was doing. I did get an early spurt of, lots of people tuning into the YouTube versions, but these podcasts are much easier to send out and are much easier to consume as well. So I have to concentrate my resources on those because I also have to earn a living and do the job that I do that actually pays me money. So anyway, that's apropos of nothing, but it's an acknowledgement that Robin went to trouble there to film himself rather wonderfully, and you're currently just getting his disembodied voice. Do I get a little smidgen of a point for his what he calls the recreation of 1985? I think we were alluding to some of the same things there about the feel and the grittiness. And yes, he described it much better than I because he's an historian and a scholar and an intellectual and all of those things, whereas I'm a lovey with an iPhone with a good memory for character actors' names. But and yes, that pulling up of the car outside the building is a fantastic establishing shot of telling you everything that these guys are about and what sort of genre they're in, and and as he says, bringing that sort of genre that we associate with modern British crime drama. Grounds the science fiction. It's what I've alluded to often in this podcast about the John Pertwee thing of the Yeti on your loo in Tooting Bec. The idea that if the background and the setting and all of the window dressing is very real and plausible, the juxtaposition between that and the fantastical is all the more stark and all the more interesting and all the more a perversion of what we know, which and there's nothing more frightening than a version of what we know that's slightly skewed or has an oddness imposed upon it or has an interloper come into it to upset it. That I think, or it tends to speak better to us than a load of people in different hats from another planet and funny salutes, getting invaded by a monster where it's not that it's never quite as effective, which is why Doctor Who keeps coming back to Earth, because it's the perversion of the recognizable, and that's Doctor Who at its best, when it takes what we know and pulls the rug from under it, or is a slightly different take on it, or perverts it. And so yes, that looks like a sort of a heist in an episode of The Professionals, into which indestructible, but not as indestructible as they should be, alien robot guys come in and kidnap the bank robbers, as it were. So it's up to you whether I get a point for that. I didn't choose Nicola Bryant. Again, because I take the regulars for granted. I love Perry. I love Nicola Bryant. I do think she could have been better served in her time in the series, and I actually think she's better served at the beginning of her run and at the end of her run than she is in this season. But that's none of that is a reflection on her. And I think Robin's quite right to highlight the gun. I remember Tom Baker highlighting how Louise Jameson holds the spade in Horror of Fang Rock when she's feeding the furnace or whatever it is in that. And he's saying, she's a bold actress there because she's doing it as an alien who doesn't quite know what a spade is, whereas a lesser actress would try to look a bit cooler about it, as it were. And I think Nicola Bryant does the same thing there, is that she and as Robin points out about the way that she holds the gun, there's a temptation when you're an actor playing cops and robbers and soldiers and all that sort of thing to go, I've got this, I like this because I'm an actor, sort of showing off. Whereas Nicola Bryant's going, I'm Perry, the botany student, and I don't really like holding a gun, but I know I've kind of got to. So instead of the vanity of the actor going, I could look pretty cool with this, holding this gun, she's very true to the character. And it speaks about her awkwardness, and it helps with the uncertainty of the drama, because there's a fragility to what she's doing, because she's not totally in control of holding a gun, because she's not kind of used to it. That's a really good thing for Robin to highlight, and I absolutely endorse that choice. But I didn't make it because I chose Brian Glover, which he might choose next time, and if he does, I get the point for that because I've already chosen him. I mean, it's a loaded weapon, that, because it means that one of the other things I choose, he obviously won't choose because he's chosen Brian Glover. So it doesn't really help me in the long term. But nonetheless, there's no way I wasn't going to choose Brian Glover, and I wasn't going to be caught out by not choosing him for episode 1 and having Robin choose him and then me not be able to choose him, because, as I say, I think he is my definite highlight. It's bizarre, I haven't really even talked about Maurice Colborne, who I think is fantastic and was very popular in our house because he'd been very memorable in Day of the Triffids. But anyway, listen up. I've got another episode to talk through. So why am I gassing on here when I might have little lulls or longueurs that I need to fill with whatever it is this stuff is that comes out of my mouth. Anyway, I'm grateful to you for listening. It's nice to be doing a Colin Baker. There aren't that many to do, and they haven't been hugely chosen. And in fact, I think this is the only one I've got somebody who sent me this, because a lot of people have chosen stories and haven't yet got round to sending me their contributions. So I've had to pretty much wait until I got this to do my next Colin. So I've done Time Lash from Emma Reeves, I've done The Two Doctors from Matt Hayden, and now I am doing Attack of the Cybermen. And I seem to in my mind's eye, part 2 of Attack is a very different beast from part 1, and in fact is it doesn't have much of what my favourite stuff about that first episode is, which is that, industrial London, urban, gritty thing that I chose, that I've just talked about at length, and instead has it's got the Cryons and that cyber tomb set that they wander around. So it's a different beast. Let's see if it's a beast that I can tame. But that's next time. So with gratitude to Robin, who, when I asked him to do this, said yes, 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 and not, as we know, all great episodes end, not by saying no, 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 no. It's not Bohemian Rhapsody, it's that other song. No, 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 no. No limits. There's no limits to how I can think I've come to a great way to end the podcast and then say something else, which I've just done now twice. Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest this time around is Robin Bunce, who can be found on Twitter at RenegadesRobin. Both R's are capitals. I'm grateful to him and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Joel Ahrens, Keith Adams, Mark Aldridge, Kit Allen, Sebastian April, Tilt Ariza, Radit Aritza, Simon Ash, Richard Alt, Stephen Bamford, Ollie Barnett, Andy Benison, Richard Bignell, Peter Blackett, Robin Bland, David Brody, Hugh Buchtman, Tim Burrows, Paul Carrington, Anthony Carroll, Phil Chapman, Ralph Chilton, Susan Christian, Steve Churchill, Kevin Clark, Mark Clues, Graham Cluley, CM, Charles Coffin, Simon Coling, Paul Colnaghy, Ben Cook, Martin Cook, Matt Corner and Paul Cornell. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. And if you would like to join the list of patrons who get credited at the end of some episodes, and the higher tiered patron you are, the more times you get a mention. But the lowest tier, which is £3 a month, still gets you on the list, and you will hear me mangling your moniker for, as I say, £3 a month, which gets you at least 3 releases per week, usually podcasts, but sometimes photos or interviews or bits and bobs. But anyway, 3 releases, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that does not include the Tuesday sneaking out of a picture of my dog, who I love and I don't care. And that's all for £3 a month at the lowest tier. There are some things that will maybe lure you up to higher tiers, but nothing really that's indispensable, because I don't like withholding things from people. So basically you get pretty much the package, certainly all the podcasts at the lowest tier of £3 a month, which you even get 10% discount of if you sign up for a year in one go. Again, all the tiers you drop 10% of if you sign up for a year in advance, because that's commitment. And for that commitment, you get bonus material and you get advance releases of the podcast. You would have been listening to this 6 months ago if you were a patron, and the Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic podcasts are usually a month, sometimes 2 months ahead for patrons, and the Far Too Much Information podcast doesn't go out to everybody else. Only the patrons get that, and that's their really sort of arcane information. Now, obviously, committing is tricky, especially financially at this hideous juncture civilization finds itself at. But if you want to do the odd one-off payment, if occasionally you feel flush or they turn the water on again or electricity suddenly becomes affordable, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock and just drop whatever you like in whenever you like. And there's no commitment there, but also none of the bonuses. But look, I know that times are tough, and the last thing you want in this day and age is to have some gimp begging you for cash. But I'll tell you what costs you nothing. Going to Podbean or iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get these podcasts, leaving a 5-star rating and some lines of review. That really helps to draw attention to these podcasts. Part of me, you see, thinks I should have done these Colin Baker stories and split them up with the not very cliffhangers, so that each one's 25 minutes, and then, it means that this would have got me, 2 slots worth of releases, which would have meant I wouldn't have, which would have just been more useful for my timetable, which currently finds me very close to transmission date, but it wouldn't have been right, because that's not how I experience them. As a youth, I experienced them as, if not God, then the BBC scheduling and timings people and the head of department and producer and script editor intended. So actually, if I watched them split into 25-minute installments, that would be how I'd never experienced them at all. And I'm sure it's the same for you as it is for me, that actually how, the memories that these unlock, the smells, the places, what was going on, just the general feeling of where we were when these episodes were first viewed is as much a part of the experience as remembering what that actor looked like or what that person said. Anyway, I've just remembered I was thinking of doing all the closing credits in the style of Brian Glover, but I didn't in the end, because I thought of that last night when I was washing my hands. See, I told you things come back to you, and like places and what you were doing and stuff, and I forgot when I'm essentially in a cupboard, but we've got the back doors open because it's very hot, so you might be the odd bit of a passing aeroplane or ice cream van bleeding through, but I've decided that will all add to the atmosphere. So anyway, you were denied my... I can't do a Brian Glover impression, but I can do a Yorkshire accent. But he had a particular style, didn't he? Which was irreplaceable, which is kind of the point of brilliant people like Brian Glover, is that they are one-offs, and aren't we lucky to have them in our homes and in our entertainments? I do like that. Anyway, the sun is shining where I am, and I think I've got a doggy who needs to bask in it. The fact that I get to do a bit of basking as well is immaterial, but it's certainly warmer here than the ice tombs of Telos, where we will return next time. I'm doing this like a proper ending rather than like a sort of rambled coda, which is kind of the vibe I normally go for, but there are no rules here in post-creditsville. We do what we like.